Hi, everyone, and welcome. It's Sandy Holterhaus, your Rec Center dietitian, and I just want to do a quick video on why we should reduce saturated fat and trans fats in our diet. So, what are saturated fats? They are basically fats that are solid at room temperature, and if you can imagine eating those fats, they can clog up the bloodstream and cause plaques in the bloodstream. And if you have high blood sugar, insulin resistance, those plaques are going to tend to get sticky and lay down more easily. So that is why it's very important that we try to decrease those saturated fats in our diet. So those fats are mainly found in animal products, but they're also found in some of our tropical oils, such as coconut oil and palm kernel oil. And those are more plant-based, of course, but we still know for a fact that they do increase that lousy cholesterol, that LDL in the body. So the recommendation from the American Heart Association is really only about 5 to maybe 7% of your total calories as saturated fat. So if you're thinking about like a 2,000 calorie diet, that is only about 13 grams of saturated fat per day. Now, just to be clear here, that's not counting all of the fat that you get to eat each day. That's just the saturated fat variety. You still get to eat plenty of monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats in the diet that are healthier for you. So some of the saturated fat foods, your butter, your ghee, your lard, again, the coconut and the palm oils. A lot of times cakes, biscuits are made with a lot of butter or lard or shortening as well. Fatty cuts of meat and cold cuts are going to have more marbling in them, which is indicative of having more saturated fat. Saturated fat makes our meat taste really good. It makes our food taste really good. 1%, 2%, and whole milks. The only ones that will not have saturated fat would be the non-fat or what we call skim milk and those products. Sausages and bacon are going to be high in saturated fat. Our cheeses are also high in saturated fat, along with pastries, pies, croissants, buttery croissants, cream, sour cream, ice cream, milkshakes. Those are all going to have a lot of saturated fat in them. Coconut milk and coconut cream and chocolate spreads are also going to be high in saturated fat. So when you're looking at your saturated fat for the day, you're going to want to try to minimize the amount that you're taking in. And again, thinking if you're having something that has more saturated fat in it for one of your meals during the day, that the rest of your snacks and meals that day, you want to have more lower saturated fat or less saturated fat. So just looking at food labels, just to compare, for example, a whole milk food label compared to a 1% food label. And you can see the saturated fat in the whole milk, 1 cup, is going to be 5 grams. Your fat, total fat, and your protein, so you can see total fat is 8 grams, protein is 8 grams, and the carbohydrate is 12 grams. When you move to your 1% milk, you can see that the total saturated fat is just 1.5 grams of the 2.5 total grams. The carbohydrate remains the same, the protein remains the same. So the only thing that's changing as they're taking fat out of your milk is that amount of fat and saturated fat in the milk. So just an example there. When you're looking at food labels, you really want to look at that saturated fat level. Again, 5 grams, that's going to be more than a third of the 2,000 calorie diet of about 13 grams. So moving on to trans fats. Some trans fats are naturally occurring because they're produced in the guts of our animals. So we get some in our meat, we'll get some in our milk products from our animals. We're not worried about those. It's very little, small amounts. But what we are more concerned about are the man-made or the artificial ones, which have been produced by taking a liquid oil at room temperature and then adding hydrogen atoms to it, so partially hydrogenating it or hydrogenating it. And the reason they do that is they want to fill up all those chemical bonds and make the fat more stable, so more shelf stable, lasts longer, easier to put into processed food, and also less expensive than using some of the saturated fat products. So in 2013, the FDA declared that trans fats are no longer GRAS, or what they call generally recognized as safe, because they contribute to higher LDL, that lousy cholesterol. They also work against the HDL. They lower the healthy cholesterol. So that was what's most concerning about the trans fats. And they also recognized that it's a contributing factor to type 2 diabetes. So another reason that you want to try to reduce trans fat intake really to only what you can get naturally from animal products, and remove it from any of the processed foods that you are taking in. Now, the manufacturers have done a pretty good job of decreasing the amount of saturated, or the amount of trans fat that they're putting into our products, but there still is a lot out there in some of these foods here. So baked goods that you might buy off the shelf, shortening, microwave popcorn, frozen pizza, refrigerated dough, fried foods, non-dairy coffee creamer, stick margarine, and I didn't put on here, but also some of the frostings, the canned frostings that you might buy may also still contain some of that the trans fats. Now, the way that you recognize this, so here's the label for this non-dairy creamer, and it says 0 trans fat. Well, by law, they can get by with that as long as it has less than 0.5 grams in a serving. So this container has 226 servings. Maybe you're going to shake in 2 servings when you're putting this into your coffee. And then at that point, you would have close to maybe a gram of trans fat. So the only way to really know for sure when you suspect a product might have trans fat is to look on the ingredients list. And here you can see hydrogenated vegetable oil. So anything that says partially hydrogenated or hydrogenated, that means that they have added those hydrogen atoms. They're trying to make the product more shelf stable, and that would indicate a trans fat. So that's all I have for you today. I will talk to you again soon.